Some heavy bursts expected, highest temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
This is your chance to win big money. The cash machine has given away almost €2 million so far in 2022. Ellen Shine in Cork is our latest winner. She was out shopping in Cork today when Barry called with the cash machine. Luckily for her, she had the number written down and bagged the cash. It means that the cash machine has now been reloaded, and this is the number you need to know: €12,876.77. To enter, you need to text PLAY to 57557. That is 57557. If it's you that we call back after 3 p.m. tomorrow, you answer your phone within 5 rings, tell us that prize amount, and you win the money. That is PLAY to 57557. The cost is €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over the age of 18, and you are playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Full terms and conditions are on our website. That is newstalk.com. You need to get your entry in by 3 p.m. and we could be calling you.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along to the Football Show on this Monday evening. Tom English of BBC Scotland is going to be with us a little bit later on to talk about Celtic's mauling of their rivals Rangers on Saturday lunchtime, and now getting ready to play against Real Madrid in the Champions League as they make the return to the group stages. Rangers also set to play in the group stages this week. We'll go into it on the back of a 4-0 hiding at Parkhead at the weekend. Tom is going to talk about that and Celtic's transformation a little bit later on in the Football Show. But Dan McDonnell is back with me. And Dan, we were just kind of saying off air last week, I think it was the last night where we were having a chat, it seemed that both Gerrard and Lampard were under significant pressure at Aston Villa and Everton respectively, and then both got pretty decent results at the weekend.
Yeah, there is something a bit relentless about this Premier League season, and it's pretty obvious why that is, because they're cramming in a lot of stuff, and it's going to get even more crammed with sort of Champions League and for those clubs that are involved in that, and because of the Qatar thing. And I suppose it's probably a bit of an off the ball thing, isn't it? Like the sort of performance rankings or power rankings, like how things can change. Like all of a sudden you're looking at Brendan Rodgers and like where are you going? Like where is he at? And yeah, I suppose like Gerrard was probably in that sort of zone of what's happening here. And Lampard, I think he exists in that state permanently to a point. When he's been at Everton, or he has existed in that state. Although I know there seems to be some sort of qualified praise coming his way. Maybe that they might be a little bit, they're a bit better maybe defensively in some ways than they have been. But yeah, I suppose the two of them at the weekend, they were pushing in the dying seconds to beat both Liverpool and Liverpool and Man City, like in the respective games, and really. Could have.
Both could have won. The Coutinho VAR decision, again, the whistle was very early on that one. And that's kind of a mitigating factor in it. But stole what would have been an excellent goal if it had been given.
No, I'm not having that one. Yeah. I'm not, because I didn't actually see that game live, and I met some people after who would be of a Villa persuasion, like, disallowed goal. So I watched it this evening to sort of go see this outrage, because the Chelsea one and some of the more obvious ones, I'm sorry, like the players stopped pursuing them. It's great strike and all, but
it's very different to the Newcastle goal against the Crystal Palace Newcastle game, and very different as well to the West Ham one, which we spoke about with Paddle, or even the Martinelli one, where there's a questionable foul on Odegaard and they go back and have plenty looks at it. And McAllister, I think, was the other VAR decision at the weekend,
Brighton one,
which robbed him of a potential goal of the month contender when it came back out, because they went back and looked at the offside from about 10 different angles and slowed it down. It probably wasn't that contentious because the whistle had gone so early. But Villa were still pushing to try and get a winner.
The fact is they were in the position. Like that was it. They were looking to score at that point. And as we mentioned, sort of like you briefly with Pat earlier on, like Everton as well too. And the Cody one, I can't even. I know VAR is a big thing this weekend, and I probably don't want to get too bogged down into it, because it's just one of those debates that comes up every so often, and I think a lot of people make the same points that they've made before. I'm still finding it hard to read some of these offside lines. Cody was offside, but there's been a couple of ones I've watched in recent weeks where I'm sort of thinking, I can't figure out it was tight. It was going wide, to be fair. I thought initially maybe has he just completely sort of stolen a goal from Mopé anyway. But I mean, Mopé had that chance himself minutes earlier from that sort of whatever 5-on-3 break or whatever the situation was. So no, I didn't. As I said, like, it won't take long for one of them to be back in crisis mode again very soon. I think, particularly the Jared one has been really, really concerning. But I mean, they can rest easy for 1 week.
From a purely Irish prism on this, it's unfortunate that Patterson has been one of Everton's best players so far this season. Yeah. Chances for Seamus Coleman to actually play are going to be pretty minimal. Yeah,
I mean, there was 2 Irish players in the Premier League at the weekend, and they were both involved in the same game. Bazunu and Nathan Collins. So Doherty hasn't played either. And I mean, the Coleman situation, like, Patterson's done well. In a way, like, I did see Coleman probably playing a bit this season. He did miss the first game of the season. He was injured at that point, but
he might be right centre back as opposed to right wing back.
And he kind of thought the more that Everton are in firefighting mode, the more they're going to turn to him. Like, if I think there comes a point where if Everton sort of ship a heavy defeat or something, like, he's the guy you want in sort of a crisis situation. And like last season, for all that, I mean, he's just getting older, and I suppose his performance levels maybe across the campaign wouldn't have been at the levels they were before. There was sort of isolated games, actually big games, where he was pretty good, towards the end of the season in particular. The Doherty one is a little bit disappointing. Again, interrupt the start of the season, so there's similarities there. And I'm kind of presuming that as the Champions League sort of takes off and they really head into that busy schedule, that games for him will come pretty quickly. But I mean, Conte hasn't actually made a huge amount of subs in games as well. It's one thing that's been very striking, that you're checking Spurs to see as he come on, and you see that Conte is clearly like he's not sort of rolling the dice as much as other people are, or utilising the opportunity to have the extra subs, which some people say is weighted. It's unfairly weighted towards the bigger sides, the ability to make all these subs that weren't there, which was basically a COVID thing that's been maintained. But Spurs, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at a handful of games as an example, but I don't think he's been making as many changes as some of the others.
It seems that Emerson Royale is very much the first choice now, starter at right wing back. And Doherty was finishing the season last season before his injury actually quite well. Seemed to have found himself as Conte's first choice, and he rotates on the other side with Perisic coming into the team quite a bit now. Reguilon has been allowed to go to Atletico Madrid, so he, as you say, he seems to have a fixed 11 around about now with quite a bit of squad depth. Maybe in the next few weeks Doherty comes into play when it is a game every 3 days.
I think that's probably the thing. I mean, I think Conte does rate him. I think there's no doubt about that, and it's just really bad timing, that injury, because he was just taking hold. And I was trying to speak to some people who cover Spurs before the start of the season just to get a sense of what the vibe was, and there was sort of positive enough messages coming back.
Martin Lipton was pretty sure he was going to start. Yeah. He was on AM a few weeks ago just before the season started, kind of doing a preview, and he thought it was a case of once Matt Doherty is fit, he is Conte's first choice at right wing back, he goes straight back in the team.
But maybe that's still true, but he's just not, he hasn't got there yet. And maybe it's helpful for Ireland in some ways, like this international break. That's okay. It's still a couple of weeks away, but maybe Spurs will be pretty happy that like Matt Doherty might come and get some minutes there and actually use that to sort of build up his base and to be involved and to go back in, because I mean they play so much football in the next while that you can't imagine he's suddenly got a Conte, for all that he likes players to sort of be super fit and put them through these sort of insane sort of show trial training sessions or whatever it was he did in Korea that time, that he's not, like, I mean, they're all driven by sports science in some shape or form. The rotation will come into it at some point, but I'm a little bit surprised that he hasn't popped him in yet. But maybe he's just happy with where things are at in that area and doesn't want to change just for the sake of it either.
Bit unfortunate for Mark Travers as well, because his last game probably in this spell for Bournemouth may well be picking the ball out of the net 9 times at Anfield, when he couldn't really be blamed for any of the goals. But they signed Neto, Brazilian international, who was waiting in the wings. Then Scott Parker goes, and first game after Parker leaves, Neto ends up between the sticks. It becomes difficult probably for Travers to get back in the team now.
Yeah, I mean, I did a good sort of job of writing a piece on the day of that Liverpool game, talking about how Travers might play every game this season, because he's withstood the disappointments of Arsenal and Man City and emerged with his reputation sort of arguably enhanced. And then, I mean, when he gets to 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, he was probably responsible for one of the goals, and you could argue that maybe the criticism that would have been the goal where the ball ricocheted up in the air and he didn't quite come and claim it. And I suppose while we're not experts on goalkeeping. You can talk about sometimes like someone you say he's not to blame for a goal. It's because the ball doesn't it slips through his fingers or something like that. Maybe someone looks at it and says they need a different type of figure behind in terms of influencing decision making from those ahead of them, and there's stuff that we're not 100% seeing. But Gary O'Neill's come in. It strikes me as, in some respects, caretaker coach coming in, you have to do something, right? Like you have to make some kind of change, and unfortunately, like a young keeper who's suffered a tough day, and you have an experienced one in reserve at the club who aren't signing very many players but have actually signed this one, you probably feel like it's probably an easier decision to make than, I don't know, dropping a more, an older, sort of more established in some people's eyes player, if you know what I mean. So, and you could spin it and say, maybe you don't want his confidence to be hurt anymore. Like, he does have a long-term deal, but yeah, it's just a little bit alarming, because to me it seemed like he was going to be the man for the season. Will he be the first choice in January? I suppose that's the question. Like, because I don't know. I mean, now that you can see the cup at the weekend.
But the classic new manager bounce kicked in and Bournemouth put in a good performance. So
he's probably not going to change it, really, is he?
Don't think he can after, again, you're looking for a response after Anfield, and that's exactly what they got at the weekend. We had quite a few games that were weird that kind of swayed one way and then went another. But Bournemouth put in a pretty good performance. Got themselves the results, and that's all you can ask for after you've been spanked 9-0 the week before. Yeah, no, and like they said, they had the midweek game as well, didn't they? Like they've had a sort of a reasonable response for a club that everyone expects to go down. Like, I see there's even a bit of chat today. I think, Hasenhüttl will face questions about Bazunu as well, because the goal that Wolves scored maybe wasn't a top class strike, but he's like very strong in his defence. But I think this is we talk about these guys getting into the Premier League, everything is magnified so much more. Like, this is the thing, it's the scale of it that, it's such, like, the games are being watched all around the world, and like, you let in a goal for Portsmouth or Bournemouth in the Championship, very few people, like, you can watch it on Quest or whatever it was, whatever it is now, ITV, is it? Like, it's not analysed and dissected and covered in the same way. And it's forgiven a bit more if a highlight goes up to Gavin Bazunu, who's made a couple of excellent saves for Rochdale or Portsmouth. People don't remember the goal that went in. Yeah,
that's 100% the case. And like, that's why it's so exceptional, like, to have young Irish goalkeepers in the Premier League when it's so hard to get there. But yeah, I think the respective seasons that those two in particular are going to have this year, I'm pretty sure, like, in 10 years' time, they might be talking about the character forming aspects of them, because no matter what they've done before, and they've been involved in some high profile games, Bazunu probably in particular, but I'm not sure if anything still compares to this, in terms of what they're having.
Football coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Sky, proud partner of our women's national football team. When we come back after a short break, we're going to be joined by Tom English of BBC Scotland to look at all things Celtic.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
The Pat Kenny Show.
My full-time nanny was leaving to go back to the UK, and I needed a new au pair. My two eldest boys asked if we could get a boy. The likes of Franco, his background was a mechanical engineer. So as far as DIY and cutting the grass and fixing the boys' bikes, he loved doing it. So I was like, fantastic. I think we're a bit behind in that whole genderising things, and we're not seeing people for people.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Mater Private Network.
Weekdays at 9 a.m. on News Talk.
Every business is preparing for new opportunities. SkillNet Ireland helps you to understand the skills your business needs to reach its full potential. Continually strengthening your team will give your business the competitive edge. Think business. Think talent. Visit skillnetireland.ie/think talent for supports on developing your people. SkillNet Ireland is a business support agency of the Government of Ireland.
Your next move matters, so why not move better? Start your move to permanent TSB today. Apply in-app for our award-winning current account. So don't just move bank, move better. Apply in-app today. Applications for Explore Current Account in-app in sole name for over 18 personal customers. Residents of Republic of Ireland only. Fees and charges, terms and conditions apply. Awarded Bunkers.ie Best Current Account 2022. Permanent TSB PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Ireland's biggest M&E Expo comes to RDS Simmons Court on Wednesday the 7th and Thursday the 8th of September. Showcasing new products and demos, trade talks and special offers, Electex and Plumex bring you the largest collaboration of M&E solutions all under one roof. Register to attend today at bepex.ie.
With 3 out of 4 suicides each year being male, Cycle Against Suicide is asking people to join its coast-to-coast Dublin to Galway cycle on Saturday and Sunday, September 10th and 11th. Help spread the message to men of all ages that asking for help is never a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of strength. Join Cycle Against Suicide on its coast-to-coast Dublin to Galway cycle in person or virtually, Saturday and Sunday, September 10th and 11th. Full details and registration at cycleagainstsuicide.com.
Think the big summer events are over? Think again. There's still time for a proper weekend with Longines Irish Champions Weekend, September 10th and 11th at Leopardstown and the Curragh. Don't miss out on proper live music, festival food, fashion with the Young Designer Award, fun for all the family, and big thrills with some of the world's best horse racing. It's an event not to be missed, so get your tickets today at irishchampionsweekend.ie for a proper day out this September.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner of our women's national football team. Outbelieve together, and we can go anywhere.
Welcome back to the Football Show. We're talking to Pat and Heaven earlier, who was waxing lyrical about how good Celtic were when he was at Parkhead at the weekend. A 4-0 victory against Rangers. Lee Labada scoring twice during the game. Celtic could have probably scored a few more than that, and he was saying, he was talking to a former Celtic player who said it was the best he had seen since the Lisbon Lions. Now, is that an over-exaggeration, or is Ange Ball that good? Tom English at BBC Scotland is with us. Tom, how are you getting on?
I'm very well. Yourself?
Yeah, look, I don't know whether that ex-Celtic player that was talking to Pat on the way out of Parkhead at the weekend was maybe just engrossed in the win against Rangers and possibly over-exaggerating, but how good is this Celtic team?
Domestically, they're outstanding. They're great fun to watch, and they've been created in a relative blink of an eye by Ange Postecoglou. He inherited a fairly chaotic club and rebuilt the team, rebuilt the atmosphere, rebuilt the relationship between the club and the fans, and he's done an extraordinary job. They're a very, very entertaining team. They're young, they're ambitious, they're creative, they're quick, and they're pretty lethal up front. But the ultimate test comes now. They've shown that they are miles ahead on Saturday's evidence of anything in Scotland. We thought after they've routed opposition that you'd expect them to rout, in the Scottish Premiership this season, we thought that the Rangers game would be a test, a battle of more or less equals. No, not a chance. They destroyed Rangers, and look, I'm not saying that I wouldn't say that they're the best since the Lisbon Lions. Frankly, I wouldn't know. But in the here and now, they are massively, massively entertaining.
Do they even compare favourably, say, if we're to look at the more recent history, to maybe some of the teams that Brendan Rodgers would have had, who also played very entertaining football a few years ago while they were on the run to what would ultimately stop at 9 in a row, or even thinking back maybe to the team of about 20 years ago with Henrik Larsson at his pomp? Do they compare favourably to that?
I'd say it's very early days, but I'd say they have absolutely got the capacity to get to that level. Some Celtic fans will possibly say that they're already there. Some say they have a way to go. I'm not sure anyone will ever get to the kind of iconic status of Henrik Larsson, but you never know. One of the greatest players ever to put on a Celtic jersey, truly world class. But Rodgers' team, the Rodgers team really was the first season, the invincible season, was the best of the Rodgers team. They were very good, way too good for everybody else in Scotland. In the subsequent seasons that Rodgers was in charge, but in his first season, they were exceptionally good. From what I've seen of this Celtic team this season, they've hit marks that the Rodgers team hit. They've hit the heights. When you talk about Abada and Kyogo and Jota, they have done things that Dembele and Scott Sinclair and James Forrest, those kind of guys did. The atmosphere at the stadium is the same as it was under Rodgers in that first season, i.e. fans thoroughly enthralled to the football that they were watching and the manager who was delivering it. Postecoglou walks on water. at Celtic Park. The man is, he's a kind of deified figure now, and I get it. I really do get it.
Yeah, because there was, let's say, plenty of cynicism, Tom, when he first came in. This idea of a guy of Greek descent who had, managed in Asia, was from Australia. He was coming in, didn't even have the correct licence to manage in Scotland when he was initially going to come in, and all that conversation about whether this was Celtic rolling the dice a little bit too much. But it would seem over the last 18 months or so since he's been in, it's not just been about the good recruitment, but also really good coaching and a very good tactical approach that has transformed this Celtic team, who looked like they were really flagging towards the end of Lennon's time in charge.
Oh, flagging would be an understatement. They were in really poor order. The fans, that element of the fans, were protesting outside the ground. The team came under physical attack after one home game. And it was a real mess. This was a club that was used to success, 9 in a row. They could see the kind of sacred 10 in a row disappearing in front of their eyes, and they didn't like it. And they went after Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe kind of messed them around for quite a while and eventually told them no. And then Postecoglou comes in, and his track record, everyone can see his track record. But everyone thought, if Celtic fans were being honest, a lot of them must have thought, geez, is this guy is he going to be good enough? But his first press conference, you thought, okay, hang on, this guy is different. He gets it. He had a command of the room. His message was very clear. He had an authority about him. And then we started to hear stories about what he was like in the training ground, what he was like one-to-one. Very impressive. He had a tough start because he needed players in. He had targets. He wasn't getting them in the door fast enough. But when that started to click, he brought in Abada, he brought in Kyogo, he brought in Jota, he brought in Matt O'Reilly, he brought in Juranovic, Carter Vickers, and a bunch of others, Hattati. And one after another have hit the mark. It's an extraordinary run of success in the transfer market. Celtic sold Odsonne Edouard to Palace and Christopher Ayer to Brentford for a combined 28 or 29 million. Celtic, Postecoglou, has used that money and assigned 8 players for the equivalent sum. 9 of the 11 that started at the weekend in the evisceration of Rangers were Postecoglou signings. 4 of the 5 who came off the bench were Postecoglou signings. So he has done an amazing job in such a quick space of time.
Yeah, because Tom, I actually was going to reference that, the volume of his own players that are already in the team now. And I'm just sort of curious, it's been this constant evolution. What is your expectation for this European campaign now? Because you look at the European results last year, and I don't know how high the Europa League and then the Conference League was in their listed priorities, but it's, February, is it Bodo Glimt sort of turned them over? Yeah. But are we looking at a different team even now compared to sort of February, in terms of the evolution of that group?
I think we are, yeah. Some of the Japanese lads, Hatate came in, Maeda came in January. The team was still bedding down. Bodo Glimt was really poor. Their European stuff was poor last season. But I think this was a team trying to get used to a new system, a new manager, trying to get used to each other. So what we've seen this season is really, and they won the league. Let's not forget it, they won the league. And were deserving winners of the league. But we've seen since they've come back in, since all these guys have had a proper pre-season, he's added to the squad, they look the real deal domestically. This is the big challenge and the big kind of exciting thing for Celtic fans and for those of us who watch them is how will Postecoglou's style, how will this team that's tearing up the Scottish Premiership fare against the biggest of the big beasts, Real Madrid? No Celtic fan thinks, they're going to blow Real Madrid away. But what they're fascinated is, can this team cause Real Madrid problems? Can Jota and Abada and Kyogo, who will be fit, he was taken off in the first 5 minutes at Celtic Park on Saturday, but he is fit. Can they put a dent in Real Madrid? Where are Celtic at in terms of the truly big picture of the Champions League? And we're going to start finding that out tomorrow night. Even if they lose, and they're obviously huge underdogs. They've got Shakhtar Donetsk and they've got RB Leipzig. I think they'd fancy their chances of maybe second, certainly third. They would look at Shakhtar and Leipzig as beatable.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst draw when you consider there were 4 seeds going into it. There were a lot better teams in the third pot, particularly than Shakhtar, that could have been pulled out. The thing is, Tom, we're talking to Pat Nevin about their approach a little bit earlier on, and he suspects Real Madrid come to Glasgow tomorrow, Celtic will look to impose their style. Sometimes Celtic have kind of sat back against the bigger teams in Europe, but he reckons Ange Postecoglou is very unlikely to change his approach even for Real Madrid tomorrow night.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Pat. See, Postecoglou is not the type to die wondering. And he would say, I'm going to send my team out there. Why should I change my style of play? Why should I tell them to be more negative? Because then I'll always wonder, well, what if I got them to play their usual style? What might have happened? He's not a what might have been guy. He's going to send them out tomorrow in the way that they normally play. And they're going to try and impose their game on Real Madrid and see if it works. And if it does, then the ground will shake under our feet at Celtic Park. And if it doesn't, well, he'll have learned something. And he's a very good learner, Postecoglou. You know, it wasn't all sweetness and light for him last season, but he learned as he went along. So I think, I think we're going to see Celtic try and play this kind of swashbuckling, pacey, energetic, hard-pressing style against the best and see what happens. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, just in terms of the manager, he just seems to have a really strong personality. I know you would expect that of managers at that level, but just with the nature of that role and that job and sort of how demanding it is that power of the personality, is that what helped to get him through some of those sticky patches last year, that he never seemed, from our sort of external removed view, to be too ruffled at any point? You're covering the beat, maybe he was, but he didn't seem to ever carry himself in a way that wasn't confident.
No, the only time I kind of saw him, and I wouldn't even say rattled, I would say maybe mildly annoyed, was right at the start when he wasn't getting players in with the speed that he wanted them in. And he had a couple of things in the media, a few glancing blows against the board, basically to say, can you hurry up? That's it. But once he got his players in, I haven't seen this guy ruffled at all. He's got great presence. He's got great authority. Even when his team played disappointingly, he's a great communicator. He exudes kind of, I've got this, in everything. In his press conference, some of the press conferences here can be a little bit testy, but he sails through them, and he has a real authority about him. And you go to press conference and you want to be on your toes when you're talking to Postecoglou, because if you ask a dopey question, you're going to get it, and quite right. Fair enough. That's the game. He's been a breath of fresh air here, and I hope Celtic get a good result, a good performance tomorrow, because I think there is something. My sense of this anyway is that there is something a bit special building here. There's a young team. Postecoglou looks like a man on a mission, and the club is. Neil Lennon, I think, did a terrific job. Brendan Rodgers did a terrific job. They're the ones who did the 9 in a row with Ronnie Dyla as well. They won a ton of trophies, but this fella, he's something a bit different, and I think really, really intriguing character.
Tom, if I could ask you about the hierarchy at the club, because as Dan mentioned a few minutes ago, and you've also alluded to as well, it seems that Postecoglou has been able to bring in players that fit his system. Is it a case of Ange Postecoglou has the final say on signings? Who's making those calls along the way within the club when they dip into the transfer market?
Well, a part of the malaise of Celtic at last summer, just after they lost the 10 in a row, was they appointed a chief executive called Dominic Mackay from the Scottish Rugby Union. And he was there for, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, might not even have been that. And then he disappeared. And, people were saying, what's happened here? It was just symbolic of the club, directionless. They appointed Michael Nicholson from within. He's a mainstay a great servant of the club. And he's done a very effective job. Very, very quiet compared to Peter Lawwell, who was basically, he was a previous chief executive. He's been there knocking on for 20 years. He controlled everything about the club. Nicholson has been a lot quieter. And I suspect his relationship with Postecoglou is really, really good. Postecoglou identifies the players. Nicholson has done a terrific job in going out and getting them, spending the money, but spending it wisely. Celtic had become very, very scattergun in the way they spent. They brought in all sorts of players for all sorts of money, and it flushed it down the toilet effectively in that last year, 18 months, as they tried to get the 10 in a row. So Nicholson is a kind of very quiet but effective character in this whole Celtic kind of renaissance. But Postecoglou is the man. I mean, the fans worship him. It's mad. You have to kind of see it to believe it. But if Postecoglou asked players or fans to run through a wall, they wouldn't ask why. They just do it.
Yeah, because I kind of felt that Celtic bought very poorly at a time, particularly when Rangers went down the leagues. It was almost like Celtic decided they were going to sign players from, rival clubs within the Scottish Premiership. And it was like things kind of didn't kick on when Rangers weren't in the top flight. I don't know if that's a fair analysis, but I felt like they bought very poorly at a time when Rangers were outside the Scottish top flight.
Well, they did and they didn't. They bought some good players around that time and they sold them on for a lot of money. And when their recruitment was good, i.e., say Van Dijk, Wanyama going back a bit further, Ki Sung-young, who they sold for 6 million. There was Kieran Tierney, who was one of their own, who was a kid at the club. When they were good, they were very good, and they were very good for a long time in their recruitment. And it was like buy low, sell high, excellent. Made a lot of profit. But somewhere along the line, they kind of fell asleep at the wheel on that front. They started spending money, 4.5 million on Albion Ayeti from West Ham, 3.5 million on Patrick Klimala, 2 strikers. No good. Shane Duffy, it was just the wrong man, wrong city, wrong club. Good player, was a nightmare here. Vasilis Barkas, the Greek goalkeeper, spent 5 million on him, could hardly make a save. So it was a lot of loan signings didn't work out. There was a kind of temporary nature leading into what should have been the 10 in a row in the Celtics fans' eyes, but they didn't get there. And Postecoglou came in, he had to clear out some dead wood, and he had a whole team to sign. Not a whole team, a whole squad actually. And it's remarkable. This is the thing that everyone says about him. He's hardly signed a poor player. His success rate is astonishing. This kid, Matt O'Reilly, he's 21. He lit the place up on Saturday. Abada and Jota were terrific. I thought O'Reilly was man of the match. They got him from England. Got him for £1 million. He's 21. And, it's a steal. They got Abada for 3.5 million. He's 20. He's scored a ton of goals. Jota, they spent money on. Kyogo, they spent money on. About 10 million for the pair, but they've repaid it. It's been terrific. The signings have been really, really good. And they've been very much Postecoglou signings. Quick players, not just quick physically, but speed of thought. That's what did Rangers in many senses. Celtic were just quicker in every sense. Speed of thought, speed of movement, and then clinical. And they look like a very, very close group. Listen, they have a huge night ahead of them against Real Madrid, but they look a very, very together team.
I suppose, like Tom, Celtic fans want to enjoy the present, but it's just an obvious follow-on from what you're discussing there. I think there might even have been, speculation about Matt O'Reilly at the end of the window. Look at the pulling power of the Premier League at the moment. It's ridiculous. Even Nottingham Forest, I think, outspending, all the other major leagues in Europe, or like some sort of crazy stats. So, unfortunately, I hear you saying like they've got these young, talented players, and you kind of feel, is the Celtic hierarchy going to be tested in that regard in the next 12 to 18 months, when inevitably there's going to be proper interest in these players from the league that's taken everyone, from bigger clubs than Celtic even?
Completely. And, if Postecoglou and the players do it in the Premiership and the Scottish Cup and the Scottish League Cup, I'm not sure anyone down south would serious money to spend, is going to pay that much interest. But if they start doing it in the Champions League, it's a different story. And we're not talking just about O'Reilly and some of the other Celtic players. We're talking about Postecoglou himself. Now, Celtic fans will tell me to shut up at this point because, you know, they don't want anyone talking about their manager moving away. But if he takes Celtic into, if he gets them into the next round of the Champions League, in the top two, in other words, then everyone's going to pay attention to him. I think people are looking at him already. I'd be surprised if they weren't. There'd be a dereliction of duty if they weren't. But I'm sure they're looking at him going, okay, he's rebuilt this team. He's rebuilt it on relatively speaking, small money. They're playing terrific football. If he starts to make strides in Europe, of course, people are going to be looking at him, and people are going to be looking at his players. Celtic fans will think, you know, they'll be praying that none of them leave anytime soon, because they all believe that there's something terrific happening here, and I tend to agree with them.
Tom, to ask you about the Blue Half of Glasgow then, like, aside from this 4-0 defeat, Giovanni van Bronckhorst has generally set up Rangers quite well away from home. They go away from home to play against Ajax on Wednesday in the Champions League. This is on the back of getting through, you know, a number of knockout games last year to get to the final of the Europa. A couple of penalties go a different way. Rangers could have been lifting a European trophy. They can probably write off last Saturday as a bad day. They've had a couple of bad trips to Parkhead in their last couple of trips now, but this Rangers team are pretty decent going into that game in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think there's a twin personality in this Rangers team. There's the domestic Rangers who dropped points in 11 league games last season. Now, okay, it's all right dropping points to Celtic, but they dropped points to Motherwell and Aberdeen and Hibs and Dundee United. They shouldn't be doing that. 11 games dropped points. That's a lot. Plus they got horsed out of the League Cup by Hibs 3-1. So there's that Rangers, and then there's this other team who turns up in Europe and beats Borussia Dortmund, beats Braga, beats Leipzig, goes all the way to the final, and just loses, as you say, in a penalty shootout against Eintracht Frankfurt. Nothing between the two sides, one penalty missed by Aaron Ramsey. So I'm still figuring out this Rangers team. They lost two stellar players, Calvin Bassey to Ajax, coincidentally, and Joe Aribo to Southampton. Two big players, physical players, great athletes. They missed them for sure. They have brought in a lot of new players. They haven't bedded in so well. Some have, some haven't. Cholak, the striker up front, has been very, very good for them. Tom Lawrence, who was missing in the Old Firm game, and they really could have done with him. He's been good as well, but there's still a jury's out on a few others. Like, Van Bronckhorst is under pressure now. The Rangers fans, there's nothing that's going to get Rangers fans irate more than a shoeing in an Old Firm game. They're now talking about the goalkeepers. The goalkeeper good enough. The centre halves. Why haven't they signed better centre halves? The midfield, is it too slow? Is it too ponderous? Out wide, they don't have enough. Ryan Kent doesn't offer enough. Young Tillman is not delivering in the biggest games. Although I think that's a bit harsh. He's only a kid. He looks a decent player. So they're asking all sorts of questions now. And at various times last season, they asked these questions too. But then Rangers went into Europe, turned over a big gun, and everyone think everything's cool. And it was. That run in Europe last season was just extraordinary. And they've done it again this year with knocking PSV out, a very good side. So I'm struggling to figure out Rangers. Would I be surprised if they went to Ajax on Wednesday night and got a result? I wouldn't be. Nothing surprises me about Rangers in Europe. Nothing at all. But there is a split personality about this team.
Strap yourself in. Two big games coming up. Celtic against Real Madrid tomorrow, and Rangers travelling to Amsterdam to take on Ajax on Wednesday. Tom, thanks a million for joining us.
Pleasure.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
The O'Brien's annual wine sale is now on, with discounts of up to 50% off a range of over 100 classic wines. Enjoy great value on favourites like Monte-Real Rioja Gran Reserva and Chateau Bintijac from Bordeaux, both half price. The O'Brien's annual wine sale. Pop in store or shop online. Please enjoy alcohol sensibly.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
At Ulster Bank, we are closing. And as a bank that is closing, we've reduced some of our services. What this means for our customers is reduced counter services in branch, no foreign exchange or night save services, and less Ulster Bank ATMs. For customers who still have current or deposit accounts, you really do need to start considering other options. Our branches remain open, and we are here to help. Switch your clothes at any Ulster Bank branch, or log on to ulsterbank.ie. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Saturday Sports Fest will take place in the Phoenix Park on Saturday the 10th of September. Bringing together people from all over the world, this will be a great family day out. A climbing wall, cricket, table tennis, GAA and football, tug of war, golf, beach volleyball, the 25th anniversary of Sport Against Racism Ireland Soccer Fest, free children's entertainment and much, much more. Come along and join in the fun at Saturday Sports Fest. Visit saturday.ie.
At Screwfix, we're giving you unbeatable value by cutting thousands of prices and trade essentials. Shop online or in over 28 stores. Screwfix, the choice of champions.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner of our women's national football team. Outbelieve together and we can go anywhere.
Welcome back to the football show. We've been looking forward to the Champions League and particularly Celtic against Real Madrid, which is tomorrow night. But we've got the Conference League coming up, Dan, as well, for Shamrock Rovers into group stage football again in Europe, and they're going in on the back of a defeat in a Dublin derby from last Friday night.
Yeah, they were very flat on Friday against Bows. I think Stephen Bradley said afterwards it was, I think he sort of said it was as bad as they played all season in terms of their performance. And yeah, it was a bit sort of subdued, and this is one of these things that you'd say it to the people involved themselves and they would deny it, but you kind of wonder, is it like they've had a really busy draining run of Thursdays, they've achieved a sort of an element of a European target, the win against Dundalk in the league sort of gave them a little bit of a cushion at the top, so they could sort of enter Europe and have a proper go at it. And I think maybe they just lost.
You couldn't blame anyone in the club for having half an eye on Djurgården coming to Tallaght this week.
Yeah, and it's not something that they
you would never admit to that.
It's not something, but it's not something even that they ease off in any way. I think just like I always think it's a bit like that Ferencváros game. I was over there, that it didn't mean everything to them when you lose that certain percent or that sense of focus or just something, and I'd be pretty sure on Thursday, I mean, you have players in that Shamrock Rovers group who've spoken about how group stage football is the one box they wanted to tick in their careers, the one thing they wanted to do more than anything, and that's coming. So now is not the time to suddenly find yourself injured or something. And I don't know, the derby is sort of, the Bows Rovers derby is it's a great game. But it was actually quite subdued for a fair bit, and there was a restricted allocation of away fans. Normally there's a sort of the full behind one goal is taken over, but Bows only gave half the allocation away because of some incidents that had happened previously. Did that contribute to this sort of atmosphere and it just lacking that sort of intensity of a typical game? I don't know. Only those Rovers players can tell you that, probably themselves at a later date maybe, but for whatever reason they were poor. But I wouldn't imagine it would bear any relation to their performance on Thursday. I'd imagine with a full tally on Thursday, you will see a different team and a different performance.
They've been good at home in Europe this year as well.
Yeah, and they won every game at home. And I know, okay, the Ferencváros one I mean, they're like, you're playing a team who was 4-0 up from the first leg, so they might have been even a bit bemused by Rovers sort of celebrating the late winner. But the Ludogorets game, they were good. The Hibernians game, the Shrewsbury game, actually poor in the second half. But in all of the games, the first three in particular, they started in the first half very well and very strongly. And I sort of wonder as well too, I could be completely wrong about this, but I think there's so many games in Europe this year, Rovers have played more without the ball. They've been actually quite effective without the ball against Dundalk in the league. They did a job on them, like with sort of 30-something% possession. I kind of wonder, like, is it part of sort of adapting their style as a team that they dominate the ball a lot at home in their domestic games. They have done in recent years, but in reality, the higher up the ladder you go in Europe, you need to be better when you counter. You need to be better against teams who may have more of the ball than you. And I kind of wonder, is this all part of they're trying different things or looking at different sort of ways of approaching Europe that might work for them? So that's something I'm looking forward to seeing from the game on Thursday night. Will it be a situation where, almost similar to that Dundalk game at home, where they sort of, will Djurgården have a lot of the ball and it's Rovers then looking to strike clinically? That's probably part of the intrigue of it.
I'm trying to get the title 100% right in this. I guess joint caretaker manager Derek Pender would be the best title I could use.
Yeah, like I think they're calling him first team coach at the moment, but joint caretaker. Yeah,
I was watching his interview with Rory O'Connor after the game on the LOI TV stream, and he was saying it was almost a return to Bo's traditional way of playing. He said they played in the Bo's style. Did you feel that watching the game?
Yeah, like I mean the first half there wasn't a huge amount going on in the game, I have to admit, but the second half, there's no doubt that like Bo's played with a lot more aggression in their play, a lot more intensity in their play. And I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure what the traditional Bo style is. I mean, they've had different managers at different times and different ways of doing things. I suppose though, Keith Long's era will still be remembered as a good one, and I think they had actually a very strong record against Rovers. I mean, there was a long run there, pardon the pun, where like Rovers had struggled to get a win against them.
10 games unbeaten, I think.
Yeah,
it went in the end.
It was certainly a big sequence, and certainly in those games there was a sense that like Bows were hard to play against, really like difficult to play against, and they sort of strong and combative in certain areas, but then it likes directness about how they broke. And Liam Burt, their Scottish player, who interestingly played for both Celtic and Rangers when he was in Scotland, they played him as the number 10, but he's very quick, and they just sort of in the second half there was a nice balance of sort of physicality, but then also that option for Burt, who like just broke direct through the middle and also then scored a superb goal, which was slightly different. It was a corner kick that broke down, but maybe there's a sense that this year they've become a little bit easier to play against, and possibly have also been a little bit brittle, probably mentally, in terms of their record for games where they led and lost the lead. Sort of off the charts. I think at one point they were top of the 60-minute league table, if there was such a thing. So there was a more purpose about how they played, but I think as well, I'm sure like Derek Pender and Trevor Crawley and probably maybe Crawley in particular, he's been around the beat for long enough. I think it was a good game for them to get into. The Rovers game, you have the bounce, but the real thing is consistently over a period of time. I think they go to Derry this week. Again, like you're away. It's not Rovers. I think you want to see more before you can declare a corner turn. I think they have to be getting that message out to players too, I think.
Tomorrow night then, Slovakia for the Republic of Ireland women's team. A lot of nervousness. I thought you were in the stands watching as a fan. I was watching on TV, and I thought that first half hour especially was really nervy, and maybe that was just part of the occasion. I'm not sure if Ruesha Littlejohn was 100% fit in the middle of midfield either. It seemed to improve when they got more legs into midfield in the second half. Will they play with a little bit more freedom tomorrow in Slovakia, given that the job is already half done and 3/4 done almost?
Yeah, you would think so. Like, there is always that danger. Like, I mean, wasn't the first Slovakia game came off like an exhilarating result, and then it's sort of hard to. You always have this thing in your head that Irish teams are better underdogs. And that's always sort of part of the perception. But I wonder. Like, I think you might be a little bit fearful of this game if if the sort of playoff was at stake with it. Like, it's made for a banana skin, like, because I think as mentioned earlier, it sounds like it's going to be a terrible crowd there. So you can talk about it being a big game, but it's a bit like closed doors football in some ways. You go there and, you know, you build up a game and then you get to the event and it's very, okay, this is the one where sometimes it gets away from teams, and I think Ireland have a little bit of experience at that, even with sort of Ukraine and sort of these type of events. So, but I in a way, I kind of wonder, could this go the other way, that the pressure is actually off, like the big pressure is off, so they might be able to approach it with a bit more freedom and just get the job done. Because this isn't everything. It's great, an opportunity to skip around to the playoffs, and there's an incentive there, but it's not quite that sort of tense. Your campaign rests on this thing.
It's not the Ukraine away game, which you always felt was do or die.
Yeah, and it was a bottle job, really. Like, you know, and like that's you can only describe it that way. Like, it just got away from them completely when it shouldn't have. But that seems to be the thing that's fueling their resurgence this time round. So you have to trust that, like, they have actually learned from it. And as I said, they were nervy in the first half, but I actually thought they managed the second half reasonably well. Like, particularly when they were ahead, there was never any sense that they were being battered or really like under the cosh, or they invited a small bit of pressure at times and maybe Finland weren't able to capitalise, but I don't know, like they're quite experienced in some ways, and
look, they've been to Sweden, a really good team, and got a result. They've been to Finland and got a result in this campaign as well. There's no reason to think if they're not switched on. I appreciate the injuries aren't ideal with some key players who are missing, but at the same time, they've got, I think, every chance of going to win in there.
Yeah, no, I think so. I just think, I think it's all weighted towards it being a good result tomorrow, in my opinion. But then you wait to see. Like, the playoff is going to be a different type of challenge completely. But I think as part of the evolution, to probably go over and almost show like a little bit of a dominance and authority is probably the next thing they need to do and back it up. But yeah, it's a weird one for them, I'm sure, because they probably were building up for this trip to mean something different. So there's always a slight danger. Talk about the Rovers thing and the Bows situation. Like, it's still a big game, but what happens maybe if you lose that 10% too, when it's not like your whole life depends on this? Maybe you become vulnerable, but I think maybe they should get it done.
Well, look, if they're going to skip through to the second round of the playoffs, it's a case of just winning, and then we'll work out the other results, because there are other games simultaneously that are being played tomorrow that will decide who gets the higher seeding to be able to go into the second round of the playoffs. That's our lot on the football show for tonight. Just to remind you that coming up on OTB AM from 7:30 in the morning, we're going to have more Slovakia versus Ireland preview, including the former Ireland boss Sue Ronan. Ashling's going to be live from Bratislava. Looking forward to the game as well. Jenny Claffey will be talking about the latest from the US Open, and no doubt talking about Serena Williams' probable retirement, I will say, at the weekend. And Matt Williams will be with us to talk about the Rugby Championship, which is beautifully poised, as we mentioned earlier in the show. From 5 p.m. tomorrow, live commentary of Slovakia versus Ireland, all with thanks to Sky, proud partner and supporter of the women's national football team. Outbelieve together and show your support as Ireland look to make history and reach their first ever World Cup. Then back on News Talk from 7 p.m. You can switch from OTB Sports Radio to News Talk for Off the Ball. Joe Malloy will be back in the hot seat. We've got Brian O'Driscoll also in studio, plenty more besides, including the Champions League. That's it even from us for now. Tom Dunn is up next. Good night.
Give him a ball and he out of grass. He'll give you a move for the perfect pass. Give him a ball and